This is a drawing of Atlantis, an island mentioned in the works of many writers for thousands of years, including Plato, Socrates, historians Strabo and Posidonius, scientists such as Francis Bacon, US Congressman Ignatius L. Donnelly, and Graham Hancock. Now, it's thought that Atlantis was somewhere in the Atlantic between Europe and North America, and that it sunk below the surface of the sea many thousands of years ago. Graham Hancock has spoken extensively about the Atlantis myth, presenting extensive evidence that Atlantis may not be a myth after all, but might have been a fact. Now, how can ToK help us to understand the problems of verifying the existence of Atlantis and other unexplained phenomenon? Welcome to ToK Today. Millions of people read the books of Graham Hancock and watch his videos on YouTube every day. He writes on a wide range of unexplained phenomena that surround us, or he points out the weaknesses and the flaws in the explanations that we have for these phenomena. Now, ToK is about looking at the evidence required to establish something as known and looking at what makes strong explanations and what makes weak explanations. Therefore, I thought it would be a worthy topic of ToK to look at some of Graham Hancock's unexplained phenomenon in terms of ToK. So let's just be clear, Graham Hancock is providing us with real-world examples of things for which we may not have adequate explanations. He's not the ToK itself, and he's not a ToK expert. He's a sort of historian. That's another video. Hancock has written a lot about Atlantis, theorising that this mythical island may have been a real advanced civilization which was lost to history. In books like The Fingerprints of the Gods, he explores the idea that the remnants of Atlantis might be found in existing structures and myths, challenging mainstream archaeological views. He cites a range of evidence for the existence of Atlantis, including common archaeological structures which are found across the globe, references in ancient texts and geological evidence, and advanced mathematical and astronomical knowledge. However, from a ToK point of view, this evidence and theory could be interpreted through the lens of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the idea that people often seek information that confirms their existing beliefs and dismissing data that does not fit. Now, when information confirms a pre-existing belief, we label it as evidence. And when information doesn't fit a pre-existing belief, we label it as an outlier or a mistake or erroneous. Confirmation bias is incredibly influential across a range of areas of knowledge and disciplines, and it makes the process of verification of unexplained phenomenon even more complicated. Let's move on to look at another of Graham Hancock's unexplained phenomenon, and this is the phenomenon of the lost civilization hypothesis. Now, this is the idea that there was an advanced ancient society predating known history. Hancock argues that this civilization had sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics, which can be seen in ancient monuments like the pyramids and Stonehenge. And Graham Hancock suggests that the remnants of this lost culture are scattered across myths, texts, and archaeological sites around the world, challenging the mainstream timeline of human advancement. Now, the challenge for archaeologists, historians, and ToK students is if we're trying to evaluate the claim of a lost civilization, we already have pre-existing knowledge, which is largely rooted in archaeology, history, and science. And that pre-existing knowledge suggests that advanced civilizations emerged only a few thousand years ago, not a few 100,000 years ago. These assumptions underpin all subsequent assumptions about the evidence presented by Graham Hancock. All of our latest physical and human scientific knowledge says that the first advanced civilizations were the Sumerians in Mesopotamia or modern-day Iraq about 4,000 years ago. Because the aggregate of all the latest and best evidence tells us that the Sumerians were the first advanced civilization. So it's very hard for us to neutrally, objectively consider Graham Hancock's claim that advanced civilizations existed way before the Sumerians. Now, our belief in later science is just as strong as earlier civilizations' beliefs in their origin stories. And just as we may now look at those earlier civilizations' beliefs as being wrong or misguided or basic, future thinkers may look at our scientific beliefs today as being wrong, inaccurate, misguided, or basic. So it's very difficult for us to verify Graham Hancock's lost civilization hypothesis because we come to it with deeply ingrained assumptions about what is right and wrong. And in many ways, we think that we are right. And in many ways, our very definition of what constitutes neutrality, impartiality, and objectivity is informed by these assumptions. As such, it could be argued that it is virtually impossible for us to be impartial, neutral, and objective in our analysis of evidence of lost civilizations. And that's because of our pre-existing assumptions of when civilization began. Okay, moving on to look at another of Graham Hancock's interesting claims, and this is the water erosion marks on the Sphinx in Giza in Egypt. Now, I've included this example because when I visited the pyramids at Giza a few years ago, I was a bit underwhelmed by the pyramids themselves. However, I was totally blown away by the Sphinx. It's far bigger and more imposing than I had imagined, and it just filled me with that sense of wonder that you're looking for when you go to Egypt. So I recommend go and see the Sphinx at Giza. Now, Graham Hancock's theory of water erosion on the Sphinx challenges the traditional dating of the Sphinx. He suggested that the erosion patterns on the Sphinx are consistent with prolonged water exposure, possibly from rainfall, possibly from rivers, or possibly from other water around there at that time. Now, this could indicate that the Sphinx is much older than commonly believed, possibly dating back to a prehistoric era with a completely different climate to our own. And this fits in with a lot of the thinking, a lot of the theories around how the pyramids themselves were built. And this then reshapes our understanding of ancient Egyptian civilization. Let's get back to the ToK. So the ToK implications of this water erosion on the Sphinx theory are that the existing knowledge base of how and when the Sphinx was made may lack the scope needed to fully explain these unusual features. We know that developing cause and effect explanations is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. When there are pieces missing from the puzzle, the picture is incomplete or completely different, or possibly even inaccurate. In the case of the Sphinx, we're not necessarily saying that Graham Hancock's theory is correct. What we're saying is that what we currently know, our existing knowledge about the Sphinx, may be incomplete or incorrect, and as such, it complicates our efforts to verify the water erosion hypothesis. Okay, moving on to look at our last example of an unexplained phenomenon, and let's look at the nature of the very tools that we use for verifying, explaining, and justifying the reliability and certainty of evidence. This example has a nifty little tie-in between the knowledge content and the tools for analysis. It's a marriage of object and subject. So, Graham Hancock has explored the role of altered states of consciousness, which are often achieved through shamanic practices like the use of ayahuasca. These altered mind states are used for understanding reality and acquiring knowledge, alternative knowledge. He argues that these altered mind states might offer insights into different dimensions or realms, challenging the scientific paradigm that dismisses such experiences as subjective or unreal. Graham Hancock suggests that these states could be a neglected source of valid, transformative knowledge, a different way of knowing and understanding the world. Now, the challenge for ToK thinkers when assessing the quality of Hancock's claim regarding altered states of consciousness is that the tool of assessment is also the object of assessment, that is, the brain or the mind. So what we use to analyse the brain is the brain itself. And our paradigm or schema for assessment of the claim about the mind is also the mind itself. The paradigm that we bring for such an assessment, be that rationalist philosophy, the hypothetico-deductive scientific methodology, or something that people call good old common sense, is also determined by the same paradigm within which our mind operates. So modern science often dismisses the idea of altered mind states as unreal or subjective, which could be absolutely accurate given the paradigm of modern science, but Hancock's arguing that other paradigms exist within which the alternative knowledge is available. What's difficult for us is to ascertain the validity of such a claim because we're operating within this given mindset. We don't have the alternative one to use. Now, let me reiterate that I'm not using Graham Hancock as a great philosopher or historian, nor a ToK-specific thoughts. I'm only using his claims because they're very popular examples, often cited as unexplained phenomenon or examples of inadequate explanations. Other links to commonly recurring ToK content include questions without answers, the strength of evidence, like ToK Essay number 6, May 24, theories fitting evidence or evidence fitting theories, the labelling and categorisation of knowledge leading to the definition of what we define as knowledge, and so on and so on. So on this theme of the possibility that our known world is a highly incomplete or inaccurate world, I can recommend a really good book written by a serious scientist. The book is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat by Oliver Sacks. It's a set of case studies of patients that Sacks worked with in his psychiatric practice in New York. Okay, let's leave this one here. If you enjoyed this content, then a like or a subscribe would be much appreciated. And if you're feeling extra generous, then you can buy me a coffee, link in the video description. Thanks for watching. Stay ToKtastic, my friends. Bye.